First the pandemic, now mountains of snow. But Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens isn't letting anything stand in the way of feeding hundreds of homebound seniors. I'm Jessica Easthope, and that's ahead.
A New York Supreme Court judge is ordering the Cuomo administration to release the total number of residents who died of COVID-19 in state-regulated nursing homes. Plus, dreamers are hopeful that a pathway to citizenship becomes a reality as President Biden continues to alter immigration policy.
Enjoy your toy.
And it's still Christmas for some lucky kids. New York's finest teaming up with one local parish in Astoria to help spread some joy. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. The snow is no match for Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens. Their meals program has been feeding around 600 homebound seniors a day during the pandemic. And as Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports, the white stuff isn't slowing them down.
Today's not one of our better days due to the weather.
Bob Garnett has braved the pandemic. So a little or a lot of snow is an obstacle he's willing to overcome. For the last 14 years, Bob's been driving around Queens, delivering food to homebound seniors for Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens Home Delivered Meals program. But none of those years were anything like this.
It's been a struggle for them. Of course, they can't get out, and especially on a day like today, they really appreciate the meals.
9,000 meals a month used to be average, but when the pandemic hit, that number shot up. In December, Catholic Charities delivered more than 13,000 meals to seniors in Northeast Queens. And over the course of the pandemic, it's taken on more than 200 new clients.
Have a good day, okay?
Some haven't left their homes in nearly a year, especially not on days like this.
We really had to take on that role of being sometimes the only person that they see, delivering that hot meal, and their point person to the outside world.
I have to call the client first.
Over the years, Bob has gotten to know his clients.
I'm okay. Your food is downstairs.
And they've gotten to know him.
But he wants me to leave it inside the door.
He knows what they like and don't like.
But this house gets kosher.
Every senior signed up for the program gets a meal, juice, bread, and milk, the basics. But the pandemic has made doing this job anything but simple.
We put it on the doorknob, we knock, we wait for the client to come out. So it's not the same as before where we could just go in and leave it on that client's table.
But the distance doesn't break the bond.
And I'll see you tomorrow, okay?
Bob's connection to the seniors on his route sometimes comes with loss.
I've known these people for a number of years. You try not to let it weigh you down, but they always pop back into your head. As soon as you pass their house, they're not there anymore.
The feeling of loss might always be there, but so will the reward of making a difference, long after the snow melts. In Bayside, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
President Joe Biden continues to make changes to the country's immigration policies, signing 3 executive orders this week alone. The first establishes a task force to reunite families who were separated at the southern border as they tried to enter the U.S. Another, he says, will address the root causes of migration to the U.S.-Mexico border by providing support to Central America to stem the flow of migrants. The last is a full review of the Trump administration's policies across the board, including the border wall and a policy that required non-Mexican asylum seekers to stay in Mexico until their scheduled court dates. And it reestablishes a task force to streamline the naturalization process. And coming up later in this newscast, we'll speak with immigration attorney Steve Maggi to find out how these changes to immigration policy will affect immigrants, especially dreamers here in the Diocese of Brooklyn. That's still ahead. Immigration is just one of many items on the agenda as President Biden tries to hammer out a COVID relief bill and get his cabinet nominations approved in the Senate, with the impeachment trial of former President Trump scheduled to get underway in just a few days. Karen Kafa reports from Washington.
Thank you, everybody.
President Biden inviting top Senate Democrats to the White House to discuss his $1.9 trillion COVID economic relief plan.
It's great. I welcome all home. This is their new home, for a while anyway.
On Monday, Biden heard from a group of Senate Republicans pitching a smaller plan and bipartisan compromise. On a call Tuesday, he told Senate Democrats the GOP number is just too low to meet the moment.
I don't think the problem is that we're going to go too big to deal with this crisis. The problem is we're going to go too small.
So with his blessing, Democrats are ready to go at it alone and quickly.
He will do his best, but unity doesn't mean unanimity, and unity doesn't mean letting the minority party block progress in the Senate.
But Senate Minority Leader Republican Mitch McConnell says he won't let Democrats move too fast.
The rushed budget process that will play out this week is exactly the wrong path toward making law.
The Senate also set to begin the impeachment trial of former President Trump next week, creating a balancing act.
We are confident they have the ability to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Wednesday brought a flurry of activity on Biden's cabinet nominees, with multiple committee hearings, while newly confirmed Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg were sworn in. In Washington, Karen Kafa, Current News.
Several U.S. bishops are expressing support for the relief package, urging lawmakers to focus on priorities like hunger, housing assistance, health care, and employment support. Writing to every member of Congress, we especially encourage you to consider how additional COVID relief should promote the dignity and value of all human life and protect poor and vulnerable people who are most at risk. Also up on Capitol Hill, a sad goodbye for Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died during the assault there last month. The Capitol Honor Guard saluting the fallen officer's remains as they lie in honor before his burial at Arlington National Cemetery. It is a tribute typically reserved for government leaders, but occasionally granted to private citizens as well. President Biden and the First Lady also paying respects with a visit to Capitol Hill on Tuesday night. As the federal government races to get out more vaccines, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio echoes the need to ramp up supply.
We have to get a better and more reliable supply to be able to take this effort up to where it belongs, which is 500,000 vaccinations per week.
According to the city, over 830,000 doses have already been administered to residents. This after Governor Andrew Cuomo left the power to distribute vaccines to local governments. Eligibility for the vaccine has been expanded to include restaurant workers, taxi drivers, and workers at facilities for the developmentally disabled. The fallout over a damning AG report on the number of nursing home deaths continues to plague the Cuomo administration. A New York State Supreme Court judge ordering the release of information related to the deaths of thousands of nursing home residents who died from COVID-19. The lawsuit filed by the Empire Center for Public Policy on behalf of families who lost loved ones in state-regulated nursing homes seeks the release of records that show the full number of residents who died from the virus, either at a nursing home or after being transferred to a hospital. The Cuomo administration has 5 business days to respond to that request. Some of New York's finest are stepping up to help one local church during these very tough times by spreading a little extra Christmas cheer in the new year. Current News' Emily Druby explains from Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Astoria.
Thank you. You're welcome. The Christmas cheer continues here in Astoria as Ivan and his little brother Elias pick out free toys.
When I tell them that, do you want to go get some toys? They're excited about it.
Choices galore brought to Our Lady of Mount Carmel's food pantry by the NYPD. Cindy Paulino helped make it happen.
The smiles on their faces, what really, means a lot.
Thanks to a big donor, her precinct collected an unprecedented number of toys in December. Even after multiple distributions, they still had plenty left. So they teamed up with this church's pastor.
These are families that don't have a lot, really. It was such a happy, sort of a surprise Christmas for them.
Distributing the toys during the church's new weekly food pantry, which has an impressive origin story itself. For over 30 years, they've run the popular pantry at their other church, St. Margaret Mary, also in Astoria. When the pandemic created an even greater need, the very active Hispanic community at Our Lady of Mount Carmel opened this second pantry, finding and collecting the food themselves, all volunteers helping about an extra 100 families a week.
Just seeing them smile makes you feel happy because some people didn't have Christmas, and because of the situation, some people don't even have jobs to even buy food, let alone presents.
The toys adding a bit of joy after a year plagued by job loss, poverty, and school closures, difficult for any child. It's also a way to build a relationship between the youngest and the finest in the neighborhood.
I think it helps them to see us that we're more human than they probably think behind the uniform and all that. And it helps them to not be afraid to talk to us and to, like I said, build a relationship.
The toy drive at Our Lady of Mount Carmel has been going on for 3 weeks. They plan to continue until all the toys are gone. In Astoria, Queens, Emily Druby, Currents News.
Now for an update on a story first brought to you by Currents News. Sacred Hearts and St. Stephen Church in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn is once again up and live streaming on Facebook.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, the Lord be with you.
The church had been banned from going live on January 22nd and has been fighting the tech giant to return to Facebook ever since. Then Wednesday morning, they were inexplicably allowed to live stream the 8 a.m. Mass, seeing an audience of over 400 people. Currents News has reached out to Facebook to find out why the church had been blocked and has yet to receive a response. There's a lot more news headed your way, exploring the origins of the coronavirus. The details as investigators with the World Health Organization look for clues in Wuhan, China.
The reason it's so unprecedented, it exploded upon us.
After more than a year has passed, we take a look at how the pandemic swept the globe and changed our lives. And celebrating Black History Month, we look back at the remarkable story of the last slave in New York who rests in the Diocese of Brooklyn.
I'm going to sign a few executive orders to strengthen the immigration system, building on the executive actions I took on day one to protect dreamers.
With the stroke of a pen, President Biden signs new immigration orders. More now on the new administration's plans when it comes to immigration. President Biden continues to change the policies of the previous administration and has more plans on the horizon. Joining us now is immigration attorney Steve Maggi, a naturalized American citizen himself. And Steve, one of Biden's plans is to reestablish a task force on new Americans to streamline the naturalization process. This is a big news here in the Diocese of Immigrants. There are 30,000 Dreamers right here in New York City. So what does this mean for them?
Well, it's good news because as part of that same executive order, there's also a mention of the public charge rule, and there's a note that's going to be taken away, and that's what really complicated the naturalization process. Not only are there a lot of people applying, but they changed the form over a year ago and added all these questions about public benefits, and that scared a lot of people into not applying because they may have accepted some sort of federal or state benefit at some point along the way when they were residents, and that scared people away. So in the same executive order, he's saying we're going to streamline this. That means to me that they're going to make it shorter, they're going to remove the public charge rule from it, and really it's just going to be about whether you've committed crimes or done something that makes you ineligible, and if you haven't and you've paid your taxes, you should be able to apply and receive your citizenship. So it's very good news.
All right, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is praising Biden, saying in a statement, "We welcome these executive orders on migration, which will help to ensure that immigrants and refugees are treated humanely and in accordance with their God-given dignity." Biden wants to help Central America stem the flow of migrants to the U.S.-Mexico border, provide other ways to migrate. But will these policy changes increase the number of migrants at the southern border?
I think that they might. The question is, can you do it in a systematic way that protects each individual as they're going through the process? Right now, because of what's called migrant protection protocols that were instituted by President Trump, you have 50,000 or more people at the borders, at different border entry crossings that are waiting in these camps that are put in very difficult, precarious situations while they wait because they're not allowed to present their asylum applications. And so that has to change. We have to revert back to at least where it was before, where if you could prove what's called well-founded fear, you have credible fear enough to warrant an actual hearing in front of a judge, then you would be paroled or admitted into the U.S. and allowed eventually to present your case.
All right, some critics say many of the executive orders are just calling for existing policies to be reviewed without any real changes that will make an immediate impact. Do you think Biden needs to do more?
I really do. I've reviewed all of them so far. There are 8 so far, and every Friday there could be more. But it's really a lot of rhetoric right now. It sounds great on paper. They talk about being humane. They talk about clarifying things, about revisiting committees and task forces. But there's not really any plan that's solid, and there's no clarity in terms of when this will actually put into motion and what could happen. And what that makes me think is that really until there is comprehensive immigration reform, there's not going to be a whole lot of change. And that's a little discouraging. So I am disappointed so far because we knew as soon as President Biden was elected and they announced it and made it official, there have been more than 2.5 months since then. We would have figured that the executive orders would really have a lot more meat to them and we would see how it's actually going to be implemented. And we don't see that right now. It's a lot of flowery language, but there's not a lot of punch to it.
All right, well, they say there is more to come, so we'll have to wait and see. Immigration attorney Steve Maggi, thanks for being here with us again.
Thank you very much, Christine.
Turning now to the city of Wuhan, where the World Health Organization has visited a research center that some suspect could be at the center of the coronavirus outbreak. The stop was a highlight of the WHO visit, which is meant to gather data and search for clues on where the virus originated and how it spread. The visit to the lab lasted around 3 hours. A member of the WHO team says they were able to hold open and frank discussions with staff there, but the press was allowed very little direct access. The coronavirus has reached virtually every country on the planet, taking lives indiscriminately, shutting down entire economies, and leaving many to wonder what a recovery will look like. Currents News' Emily Druby takes a look at how the pandemic has changed the world.
We have witnessed the emergence of a previously unknown pathogen.
On December 2019, a pneumonia of unknown origins is first detected in Wuhan, China.
The coronavirus presents a public health emergency in the United States.
By February 2020, a global public health emergency is declared as the virus spreads like wildfire around the world. Hundreds of Americans fled the epicenter of the outbreak in China, placed under a strict quarantine at U.S. military bases.
This is the first time in more than 50 years that CDC has issued a quarantine order like this.
The U.S. already had its first known human-to-human transmission of the virus.
He was put into isolation when public health learned that he had developed symptoms.
By the end of February, global air travel had been restricted and the CDC was sending out a warning.
It's likely that this virus will cause a pandemic.
Officially declared a global pandemic by the World Health Organization on March 11th, 2020. By mid-March, the virus brought the world to a grinding halt and life as we knew it had come to an end.
We cannot be in close proximity to each other.
Sporting events canceled.
The NBA has suspended games until further notice.
School buildings closed.
We have to take this action.
Movies and concerts shut down. Hospitals quickly overwhelmed, desperate for PPE as medical supplies ran short and testing was scarce compared to the need.
It's underlying why this crisis could get a lot worse, because we can't even get our arms around what's happening if we don't have testing capacity.
By April, the United States hit 1 million confirmed cases.
The reason it's so unprecedented, it exploded upon us.
The U.S. government launched Operation Warp Speed. The race to develop a vaccine was launched in May.
We're looking to get it by the end of the year if we can.
As cases skyrocketed in December, the vaccine was ready to roll out with the emergency use authorization of the first of several COVID-19 vaccines.
It looks to be roughly 95% effective at preventing disease, including 100% effective at severe disease.
Just a week later, vaccine vials were shipped across America and shots started going into arms. America's top health official says we will still face dark times, but remains optimistic that we will prevail.
I believe by the time we get to the fall, we will be approaching a degree of normality.
Emily Druby, Currents News.
Still to come on Currents News, a touching story of friendship, how two seniors who've been friends since the 40s overcame COVID-19.
She said, I gave you the best years of my life, and now it is your responsibility to take care of me.
And continuing to remember Black History Month, we look into New York's hidden history as we uncover the story of the state's last slave. Two South Carolina women who have been best friends for more than 80 years have beaten the odds and survived COVID-19. 92-year-old Mary Louise Lucas and 91-year-old Alma Gates met in 1940 and have been close ever since. But when Gates was diagnosed with the virus in July, Mary Louise was scared.
And then we went to Columbia High School, and we graduated in 1946. Long time ago. I worried myself sick about it.
After 6 weeks, Gates finally recovered and the two resumed their socially distanced visits. But then Lucas tested positive in early January. Now she's recovering. The ladies are busy planning for the day they can get back to their lives before the pandemic, which includes shopping, visiting family, and singing at church. Just amazing. And finally, as we continue to remember Black History Month, we have a fascinating story to report about the last slave in New York, a Christian woman who rests in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Currents News' Michelle Powers tells us about her life's journey.
More than 500,000 people are buried in the heart of Brooklyn. So it looks like it should be right over here. Names we may know well.
Leonard Bernstein is one of our most famous people, Horace Greeley, Boss Tweed.
And those time has forgotten, like the headstone Greenwood Cemetery historian Jeff Richmond leans over now.
Okay, so
it's one he recently found. Margaret Pine, a slave. Sold while still an infant, she belonged to a wealthy family, the Van Zants.
Raising what turned out to be 11 young boys in the family.
After the boys had grown, Margaret wished to leave the family farm in Little Neck, Queens. She wanted to live in the city, working for wages. The Van Zants gave her permission to do so and were willing to free her. Around that time, New York was abolishing slavery, but that's not what she wanted.
And she said, I gave you the best years of my life, and now it is your responsibility to take care of me.
Margaret remained the family's property, so they would still have that legal obligation to take care of her until the day she died at 80 years old. That was in 1857, 30 years after the last slaves in New York were thought to be freed. Now, when the Greenwood team found this grave, it was actually still in the dirt and the grass was growing over it and they couldn't read it at all. So what they did was they rubbed out the words. They were able to read the inscription.
And then it says slave.
The research team also found an article in a Brooklyn newspaper that spoke of her death and officially named her New York's last slave. But Margaret was more than just property. The newspaper says she was a faithful Christian until her death.
And she was in fact asked where she wanted to be buried. And she said that was really not one of her concerns, that her soul would be separate from any place that she would be interred.
Margaret Pine's obituary concludes, she lived life like a sincere Christian and died like one, cheerful and without a struggle to the last. In Greenwood Cemetery, Michelle Powers, Currents News.
And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.